NFL preseason just beginning to unravel throughout the National Football League, who can we expect to rise up above the rest and make the 53 and surprise us for their rookie season? And rumors involving the Eagles' management of Riley Cooper. What does that mean for the football team? All that and more next on NFL Goal Line Live.
Hello and welcome inside the NFL Goal Line Studios. Thank you guys for joining us on yet another Monday night. We are live and we are set to bring you another week of football. And we do have NFL preseason action finally on tap here, along with some updated injury reports around the National Football League. We'll take a look at the top 100 players of 2013. It's our third rendition of our 4-series countdown. And we'll also take a look at other things going on in that NFC East, going on with the Philadelphia Eagles, Riley Cooper, the wide receiver, more troubles going on there, and also in that Philadelphia organization. We'll go to all that and more on this edition of NFL Goal Line Live, but we'll get started here with a recap of the Hall of Fame night. It started off with a weekend filled with emotions as 7 of the top players in NFL history were enshrined, a very elite class being the Hall of Fame. We'll get to that in just a moment, but ensuing that Hall of Fame was the game between the Dolphins and the Cowboys. It was a back-and-forth affair hosted on the NFL on NBC. It turned out to be a victory by the Cowboys. But to me, it seemed like the Dolphins, for the most part, dominated all game long, with the exclusion of that Dallas offensive line that time and time again pushed back the Dolphins' defense, led by Dion Jordan, who struggled for the most part outside of pass rushing situations. Andrew, we join you here. This is Andrew Goldstein, co-host of the NFL Goal Line Live. Thanks for joining us. And Andrew, what was your takeaway from the Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio, just from a couple days ago?
Well, to be honest, my takeaway is not much. I mean, the Cowboys won 24-20, like you said, and to be quite honest, I don't think it's any more than that. It's one preseason game of which the starters played a very, very minimal amount, some of them not at all, and I really don't think that you can read too much more into that. I'm a big believer in preseason having meaning, but I feel like the Hall of Fame game is a little bit too early to see anything. I mean, obviously the Dolphins had some very good players and who made some game-changing plays, like that 75-yard interception return by Devontae Holloman, I believe his name was. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to matter too much. If the same players who stepped up in this game are still performing by week 2 or week 3 of the preseason, then I'll start to take notice. But right now, I don't put too much stock in it.
And 2 of the guys that definitely made their stock rise throughout this night's performance was obviously Devontae Holloman, but also the man who led both teams in receiving by a mile was an undrafted rookie free agent from Mississippi State. It was Chad Bumphis, 5 catches, 85 yards. Just watching him play, he had 4.4 speed, and it did translate to the football field. He's an undersized receiver, but he did make his impact known and felt around the NFL. And sure, it may be just one game. It's just a preseason exhibition matchup. But in my mind, I think that the preseason is very vital to the players on the brink, to the starters. You can't really put much to any of the blame on Ryan Tannehill, despite his terrible performance. He still will be a very solid quarterback this season. It's just one game. You can't really place a guy who in 5 weeks will finally play games. That's for real. But for right now, Dolphins and Cowboys, very interesting start to the NFL season. Now, just a couple days earlier, we had a couple players enshrined into the Hall, including Warren Sapp, Curly Culp, Bill Parcells, just to name a few. Andrew, who do you think was stood above the rest among that class? Obviously, it's a very select group to begin with, but of those players, who do you believe really made their impact felt? Because even in a Hall of Fame class, there are people that are obviously better than others. Who do you believe was definitely changed the game the most out of that Hall of Fame class? If you could put your finger on any one of those guys who you believe that changed the sport of football as we know it.
Well, This is actually the second year in a row where one of my favorite football people ever was inducted. Last year was Curtis Martin. I'm a Jet fan. Love Curtis Martin. This year, it was Bill Parcells. I think that Parcells should have gotten in on the first ballot when he was nominated last year. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. But it was absolutely the right thing to do to put him in this year. He was a transcendent coach. He always knew the right buttons to push to motivate his players. He managed to handle Lawrence Taylor, by all accounts, one of the most difficult players to manage in the history of football. He won a Super Bowl with the Giants. He turned the Patriots around. He turned the Jets around. He did a lot of great things, and a lot of his players still contact him. And I feel like that's probably one of the greatest testaments to a good coach, is if he continues to have a relationship with his players beyond his coaching days. And I think Bill Parcells does. And I actually wanted to ask you a question about Parcells and coaches, Nick, because I was thinking about this earlier today. If you were starting an expansion team and you could have any coach in history, would you take Bill Parcells or would you go for someone else?
I think the obvious shoo-in would be Bill Walsh, the coach of the 49ers. You look at championships, none did it at a more consistent level and turned the team around that the Niners were a laughingstock in their own right before Walsh is put his way into the Niners organization. Turn that thing around, and 3 championships later, he's one of the great coaches in NFL history. But I think Bill Parcells is one of those underrated coaches, a guy that sunk under the radar for a majority of his career and doesn't really have the hardware that you have other coaches around the National Football League. But in my mind, I think that Bill Parcells definitely needed to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And he still is one of the great coaches to ever be a part of the game. And in my mind, I think Parcells was the greatest coach in Giants history, let alone Tom Coughlin. I think Bill Parcells did a great job managing his players and managing the talent that he has around him, where for a majority of his career, in fact, even on that Super Bowl run, he didn't win it with a Hall of Fame quarterback. He did it with Jeff Hostetler, who was the backup quarterback for the entire season. I think Bill Parcells did a fantastic job with the talent that was around him. He isn't, in my mind, the greatest coach to ever play, or obviously to ever manage the sidelines in a National Football League game, but I do believe that he was one of the best and the greatest in Giants history. But also another guy that I want... Or go ahead.
Just to cut you off just for 1 second, because this is an important part of Parcells' legacy. This might be why he didn't get in last year. But I always felt like the one thing that was really kind of unsettling about Bill Parcells was that you never quite knew whether he was going to come back or retire. And he kind of did that dance every year, and I feel like maybe that's why he didn't get in on the first ballot.
Honestly, I think that might be the reason why Brett Favre might not immediately be enshrined as a first ballot Hall of Famer as well. It's just it's that dance between being in, are you going to play another year or not? Because he did take a big chunk of the 1990s, I believe, where he didn't coach at all. Then he came back and didn't have the same success as he had before. Obviously, you could look at that and say, hey, I mean this. He'll be able to get in, but I don't think he should be there the first time around. I never believed, though, and I don't know if you agree with this, about not having a guy in the first time when he obviously deserves to be in no matter what. Why wait? Similar situation for Chris Carter. Why wait so long when he is a Hall of Famer? Why put in another guy? Obviously, anyone that goes in should be, anyone that's in the Hall of Fame currently, there could be an argument for all of them that they should definitely be in, but why should Chris Carter wait so long to be in the Hall of Fame?
I never got it either, and actually I'm going to take that one step further. I feel like you are either a Hall of Famer or you're not. I was never in favor of just nominating people every year just for the purpose of having an induction ceremony. I feel like there should be some kind of standard metric where 50 or 60 or however many members of the NFL media get together. I actually think it's 40 the last time I checked, and vote on whether a player is a Hall of Famer. And if they get 80% of the vote, they should be in. And if not, sorry, they missed their window. Reviewable every couple of years. That's how I feel like a player's or coach's Hall of Fame candidacy should be decided. Because what you get are years where there are some future Hall of Famers that aren't eligible yet, but you've already inducted all of the obvious ones, so you start inducting borderline people to have a ceremony just to enshrine somebody that year, and I don't feel like that's the way it should work. And it kind of annoys me that every single sport does it.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where there's 7 guys that you have to put in the hall, and maybe one year there's 10 or 11 guys deserving of that honor, and the next year there may only be 2 or 3 guys that definitely you could say absolutely changed the game and it deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I think that needs to be adjusted a little bit, but in a sense, you would hate to have a whole year where not a single player is enshrined. I don't think it ever gets to that level, but I do believe that you have a very valid, solid point that definitely would be up for review and definitely up for consideration at the league office because of just how inconsistent as far as guys in the Hall of Fame, where not every year everybody that was enshrined definitely can be at the same level of other guys. Obviously, it's an elite class to begin with. But then you bring in guys, let's just say one year where there's a very weak class coming in. When Donovan McNabb recently retired, this is the example I use very often with this situation here. Donovan McNabb, a very good player who definitely changed the game and brought his Eagles to the Super Bowl and to 5 NFC championships, but he just wasn't an elite player. He was an extremely good player, but never took his team to that next level. Definitely guys that are elite elevate the talent around him. And McNabb, as good as he was, couldn't exactly do that. And then on top of that, couldn't bring home the hardware. He didn't have that championship that definitely rises the consideration of, you know what, hey, this guy, sure, he may not have been spectacular, but he did win a Super Bowl, similar to Bill Parcells, where he wasn't necessarily spectacular. He wasn't, like, clear-cut the greatest coach in that decade or in that time frame, but he certainly was more than good enough to be recognized as an elite member. When you bring guys like McNabb into the Hall, a few years from that, it raises the question of, well, if McNabb's in the Hall, why isn't Tony Romo in the Hall of Fame, or Phillip Rivers, or guys that are borderline in there? So when you bring in borderline guys over a period of time, it's just going to lessen the quality and the importance of being in the Hall of Fame, because you see the elite class of guys like Jerry Rice who were just so great for the sport. And then there's people like McNabb and Romo that weren't exactly changing the game, yet are in the same class as the greatest of all time, which would definitely be a shame.
And also, I don't know if you agree with this, but I was never in favor. This is going along with my whole either you're a Hall of Famer or you're not argument. I was never in favor of waiting until players retire to induct them into the Hall of Fame. Like, there's no doubt that Tom Brady is a Hall of Famer. Just induct him now and have the ceremony. There's absolutely no reason to wait. Do you see the merit in waiting 5 years after they retire, or any number of years after they retire? Because I certainly don't.
Well, absolutely, and it also brings up the point why not only wait that long, but why wait for players that you still think deserve to be in the Hall, but let's hold off a couple years because he wasn't extremely great. So we'll wait a couple years, we'll push him back before he finally gets in the Hall. That was the case with Art Monk, who waited, I think it was 20, 25 years before he finally was enshrined. I think the system, Andrew, is relatively solid. It's just there are little things here and there that definitely could make it a lot better. But at the end of the day, the guys in the Hall of Fame changed the game as we know it. Warren Sapp, Chris Carter, Curly Culp. I'm trying to get all 7 off the top of my head here. There's Bill Parcells as well. It was, can you name off the other 3? Do you have that list with you? But obviously these 7 need recognition as the greatest players that changed the game, who retired obviously 6 years earlier, or to some degree like that. But of the 7 guys in the Hall, those are definitely ones that definitely changed the game.
Pulling up the list, by the way.
All right.
Let's see here. Class of 2013 Pro Football Hall of Fame. Larry Allen. Larry Allen's another one. Can't forget about him. And in fact, I'm surprised that I forgot about him because I love offensive linemen.
A little too much.
Let's see. Chris Carter, Curly Kolb. You mentioned all these. Oh, I forgot about another offensive lineman that I loved, Jonathan Ogden.
Oh, him.
That first draft, Dave Robinson, linebacker for the Green Bay Packers back in the 60s. But I'll tell you, Jonathan Ogden was part of that fantastic first draft class for the Ravens when Ozzie Newsome got him and Ray Lewis. I don't think we'll ever see a first round like that again.
Definitely, Ozzie Newsome did his part, but I mean, as well, there were some fantastic speeches, and we mentioned Larry Allen. He's a guy that, following his experience with Reggie White, apparently he started becoming much more motivated about the sport and could bench. I believe it was something over 700 pounds. I mean, these are some fantastic players enshrined in the Hall of Fame. Absolutely. And the speeches were another A+ for all of these players, now officially Hall of Famers. But we're going to move on here on the NFL Gold Line Live with Nick Rice and Andrew Goldstein. You can contact us at 951-515-4552. Get your questions in, along with on Spreaker.com's National Sports comment page. We're going to get going here and move on to a topic that has been dragged out, in my mind, way too long. This is the Riley Cooper situation, and how just a week ago there was a video that was leaked where sometime during the summer at a concert locally, he used the N-word and some other profane language, showing some disdain, hate towards another person who wasn't caught on camera. But the point is, Riley Cooper showing some huge disdain and just showing this racism that we haven't seen much before. But this is a concerning issue in that Eagles locker room. And typically situations like this, unless you have such a tight-knit team and with a new coach, this is just drama that doesn't need to be inside that locker room. But you can say, and this may be the situation here again, but this just might be splitting up the team a little bit, because we have other leaked comments about how this would have been handled if this wasn't Chip Kelly, but this is Andy Reid's team. And there are other comments about how Michael Vick doesn't trust the wide receiver anymore, but he was forgiven and put back in the league off of dog-killing charges. I mean, very interesting scenario here where you can just scratch your head saying, look, this situation, in my mind, is completely overblown. One mistake on a situation where he's nowhere near his teammates, and this is just a video of so much privacy invaded here, where he's in the middle of a concert recorded here. And in my mind, I just think this is overblown. But with the Eagles not putting this situation to dead, this is where this Philadelphia team might be going down the tank this year after already going 4-12 last campaign.
Well, I have to address your comment that his privacy was invaded. Unfortunately, privacy or something like it no longer exists for public figures.
Absolutely.
Riley Cooper isn't Tom Brady. He's not universally recognized per se, but people around Philadelphia are going to know who he is, especially since he was at the concert with a bunch of his teammates who actually appeared on stage at some point in the evening. I think it was a Kenny Chesney concert, but he's there with his teammates. He honestly didn't think that somebody would record that. I mean, I don't think he had his privacy invaded. He is a public figure. He said something that was out for public consumption. He didn't say it in confidence to anybody. But I feel like the Eagles handled it poorly by not doing more. I don't think that Riley Cooper should be on the team anymore. And it's not just because of the comment, because it's obviously the comment's horrible, but just according to the CBA, or the new collective bargaining agreement, you can't suspend players for language. So if you're going by the rule book, he shouldn't have been suspended, which he wasn't, but I feel like he should be cut because of the effect he's having on team morale. I mean, LaShawn McCoy has already come out and said that his relationship with Riley Cooper is over beyond the football field. Michael Vick said publicly that he forgives Riley Cooper, but who knows what goes on behind closed doors. The population, or the majority of most NFL teams, is African American, and I don't think that everybody in that locker room truly forgives him or is willing to have a relationship with him. And that's going to cause a controversy, and I feel like it should be nipped in the bud and he should just be cut right now. That's not something that Chip Kelly needs to be dealing with.
Especially in his rookie year, and you also add in the fact that if the locker room does not accept wholeheartedly the apology, I think Riley Cooper has done a fantastic job at owning his mistake and moving on from the situation, where he posted on Twitter about his apology and how he has ruined this fan base and how he just made a terrible mistake, and he is more than willing to accept the punishments. But the Eagles turn around and just slap a fine on him. And for a guy that makes several million every year, I think that's a very, very light penalty for something like that, where you're dividing your locker room and, frankly, you're hurting the football team. This could be another 4-win season just because of how this locker room is not behind the back of a guy who's trying to own back his football team. And right now, I just think being released is the best situation for the Eagles. This may not be the short-term solution, but long-term, this will help Chip Kelly. And obviously, the chemistry in that locker room will be a lot better, especially later on in the season when guys are fatigued, guys are hurt from nagging injuries towards the end of the year. That happens to nearly every player. In some way, shape, or form, you're hurting somewhere. And that just will not be a good situation in December, trying to win games late when your team, frankly, doesn't have the back of your receiver. When your own franchise quarterback, who is African American as well, is saying, well, I mean, I forgive you, but I don't like what you did, and frankly, I can't be behind you when you say something like that. Like, I thought I knew you. Yeah, I thought I knew you, but I don't know you anymore. Does that sound like somebody who's going to be more than willing to give the ball to Riley Cooper after a situation like that, when you can't even say, you know what, I understand and I can move on from it?
Well, I feel like there aren't going to be any issues on the football field because players have a way of kind of blocking out personal things and reducing it to all business on the field. I mean, there have been teammates throughout history and players and coaches throughout history who haven't necessarily liked each other but have managed to...
But I mean, through a whole season, though, I mean, McNabb and Owens just tore each other apart, especially towards the latter part of their career, where Owens had to move on, and same with McNabb. I think, personally, you can hide it for a couple games, but a whole year?
Owens.
What'd you say?
But Riley Cooper isn't Terrell Owens. And
right.
I feel like T.O. is in a class all by himself.
Okay, yeah, that's good point taken. I just think...
But I feel like Riley Cooper did learn a valuable lesson beyond simply not using hate speech in the future.
Right.
And that is to not get inebriated, to not get drunk when he knows he's going to be out in public where anybody can film him. Because there are multiple reports coming in, and a lot of pretty logical reports that he'd enjoyed a few pints before he went off to the concert. And when you're in that situation with so many people around you, and once again you're a public figure, it's not necessarily the greatest time to have impaired judgment.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's a learned lesson. I think Riley Cooper's sincere in his apology, and I think he's moved on, but I just don't think it's the best scenario for the Eagles. We'll have to wait and see how that works out, but he's not even a top receiver. He was supposed to be the number 4 wideout before the Jason Avant injury that Jeremy Maclin. Jason Avant has now moved up as well, so it'll be 1, 2, 3, Deshaun Jackson, Avant, and then Riley Cooper. But to be honest, with the lack of talent that you have there, I don't think keeping him around will help. I think he'll still be a very viable option for an NFL team in the future. Best scenario, though, is not with the Philadelphia Eagles, I think, in my mind. He may have just hurt his stock of being a long-term wideout, especially in a contract year, for being an Eagle receiver after this season, if indeed he's kept around through the preseason. But we're also going to move on to, in my mind, our main portion of the show. Definitely.
Oh, wait, you forgot something.
All right, let's hear.
You forgot one thing. Big injury news. We promised to cover this at the top of the show. Packers left tackle Brian Bulaga done for the year with an ACL injury. You know, I'm a big offensive line guy. I had to get the left tackle injury in there. But in all seriousness, this is going to be a big issue for the Packers. They allowed 51 sacks last year. That's second most in the league behind Arizona. And with Bulaga going down, they really don't have any answers. They could maybe try to play Marshall Newhouse out of position, maybe hope that Josh Sitton is ready to rotate over there, but a left tackle injury this early can really cripple a team. We all remember what happened last year with Arizona when Levi Brown went down for the year, and that whole left tackle situation was just a revolving door. I think that this is a huge problem for Green Bay. I don't trust teams that lose left tackles and centers.
Yeah, see, the Achilles heel last season with the Packers as well was their offensive line, and now you plug Bulaga on that IR report, and that just makes things 10 times worse for a team with your franchise quarterback, and in many experts' eyes, the greatest quarterback in the NFL right now. If he's being sacked 51 times every single year, you better believe that your quarterback may start to digress sooner than you would hope for. When your offensive line can't even formulate some sort of a running game, also bottom 5 in the league there. I think Bulaga, huge injury. I can't believe we wait 28 minutes to bring that up, especially with...
By the way, keep in mind, this is Aaron Rodgers getting sacked 51 times. He has the quickest release in the league, some of the best footwork, some of the best decision-making. And he's still getting sacked 51 times. If you put a guy like Blaine Gabbert or Kevin Cobb behind that line, you would have a legitimate shot at 65 or 70 sacks.
And that receiving core as well definitely gets you out of a lot of situations when you have 4 or 5 wideouts that can start in the National Football League, be a number 1 or 2 at some NFL teams. But as we move on here on the NFL goal line, we hope to have Robert Dieters very shortly on the show. He is the commissioner of the national sports radio station here on Spreaker.com. Again, you can contact us through the Spreaker National Sports comment board. Also, contact us through our cell phone line. Call or text at 951-515-4552. Our favorite part of the show is the NFL Top 100 Countdown. We took a look at numbers 74 to 50 last week, and now part 3 of our 4-part series is a recap of numbers 49 through 25, and we'll take a look player by player and also give our thoughts about who we believe should be higher or lower, along with the overall reactions of the top 100. On number 49, they started off with Justin Houston, linebacker of the Kansas City Chiefs, making the countdown. Then it went Dwayne Brown, Tony Gonzalez, Cam Newton, LaShawn McCoy, then Wes Welker, Eli Manning, Haloti Ngata. All right. All right, we'll stop at 45. All right, sorry about that. Yeah. 45. Obviously.
You still there?
Yeah, I think, honestly, LaShawn McCoy at 45, sure he doesn't get the touches, but that, in my mind, may be a little bit too low. Wouldn't you agree?
Too low?
Because he is a very good Pro Bowl back who just doesn't get enough carries. He was one of the top yards per carry backs in the league. And you're telling me that he's number 49 when we see guys higher like Ray Rice who couldn't have nearly the same yards per carry as a guy like obviously number 45, LaShawn McCoy. He just is on a team with no offensive line. And we add the fact that they can't pass the ball, and defensively they are shaky at best. I think LaShawn McCoy, you plug him out of the Eagles, and this is a significantly worse football team.
Well, you know what? You do have a good point, but I always thought that it's very telling that LaShawn McCoy was starting to be marginalized towards the end of the season there, with Bryce Brown starting to get the majority of the touches. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think that LaShawn McCoy is a very efficient back. I mean, obviously he has some good moves, and laterally he's very good.
I mean, you could say one of the best receiving backs in the league also. Just throwing that in there.
But actually, we might have a little bit of a disagreement on the stats. I was never under the impression that LaShawn McCoy's yards per carry was that good. And here it is, 4.2. Worse than D'Angelo Williams, worse than Stevan Ridley, worse than Willis McGahee. He's not anything that special from a yards per carry standpoint. And I feel like it's kind of like the Chris Johnson thing, where even if he has 9 bad runs, the 10th one where he hits a 50-yard home run touchdown is going to erase the memory of those 9. I feel like it's the same thing with LaShawn McCoy. He has 2 or 3 fantastic runs per game, a couple of really great juke moves, but that makes you forget that he's not a very efficient back.
I would definitely take your point into consideration, and definitely that definitely lowers his stock here. But when you add the fact that his talent around him isn't spectacular, and he's also, I mean, we could take a look at the receiving game as well for McCoy, towards the top by far in the league as far as running backs go. He's a very solid receiving back out of the backfield, one of the top threats for Vic in that passing offense through last year.
Well, I feel like that is more a design of 2 things. 1, the scheme, and 2, the situation. Michael Vick and Nick Foles were under duress constantly last year, so that led to a lot of checkdown passes for LaShawn McCoy, and checkdowns usually gain somewhere on the order of 4 or 5 yards at least. And secondly, the Eagles' offense has always been designed very heavily around getting the running backs involved in the passing game. We saw it with Brian Westbrook a couple of years ago, and we even saw it with Deuce Staley way back like 9-10 years ago. So I feel like that's more the system than anything else. I feel like he's definitely a viable threat catching the football, but I don't think that he's anything special.
I mean, catches are catches, but another system player in many people's eyes is number 44 on this list, Wes Welker. Do you think that's a little high for the former Patriot, now Bronco receiver? Do you think that's a perfect spot for him?
I feel like that is a good spot for him, because I understand that he's been given significant cushion over the years playing in New England with Tom Brady and guys like Randy Moss and Brandon Lloyd going over the top to clear out the safeties, but there's something to be said for a good slot receiver, and more importantly, slot receivers are where the NFL is going today. The fullback has been switched out for the third receiver. Players are starting to teams are starting to clear out the middle more and more to get guys like Wes Welker involved, or tight ends like you see the Patriots run, or at least they used to with Hernandez and Gronkowski. But I feel like Welker is properly rated not only because of his abilities and his 100-yard catch seasons, but because he's the perfect representation of what a modern NFL offense wants to have. And it's what the Rams are trying to get with Tavon Austin, and it's what the Patriots were lucky enough to have for the last 5 years.
I think it's safe to say there might be at least a small drop-off now with the Broncos for Wes Welker. But in my mind, I do think that's a perfect spot. I mean, there's something to say about a guy who leads the league in receptions. But we'll move on this list, but also bring in the national sports radio station commissioner on Spreaker.com, Robert Dieters. We're taking a look at the numbers 49 to 25 on the NFL Top 100 Countdown. We're just looking through the list, and we'll get to it at number 38, a San Francisco 49er. I'd like to get your observations on this. But number 43, we had Eli Manning, then Haloti Ngata, Jason Witten, Ndamukong Suh at 40. I think that's a little too high for the defensive tackle. But we'll just move on here. 39, Roddy White. Now, 38, Vernon Davis. He is ranked, I'm looking right here, as the number 2 tight end in the National Football League, just behind Rob Gronkowski. Do you agree with that spot? 38 for Vernon Davis in his 5th NFL season.
Yeah, you made that tough situation on me, in my opinion. Now, you're saying Rob Gronkowski is number 1 tight end. I cannot agree with that. Vernon Davis should be number 1, a man that really carried the 49ers last season, carried them to a Super Bowl. And, I'm just really disappointed in the way that how the rankings work. He should not be 38 at least. Even having top 2 tight ends, he should at least be in that top 20 because how good of a player he is. He's dedicated. He works hard. Goes out to the field. He makes big catches for his team. He runs down the field. He's pretty much basically like a wide receiver. He's the fastest guy on the Niners squad. And now coming into this year, we're going to see how he does. But being the number 2 tight end in all of football right now, I disagree with that.
I actually think I can speak in the mind of Andrew Goldstein and agree with him in this aspect. We take a look statistically, not only that, but also through that Niner offense that was regenerated through the second half of the year. We saw Vernon Davis with a reduced role throughout the second half of the year, and also the last 3 seasons, very easily his statistics as far as receptions, receiving yards, and in 2 seasons, receiving touchdowns has dropped significantly, almost in half through 2010 to 2012. Your explanation on that and how he should still be the number 1 tight end, number 38 on this list. I mean, this is the top 100 in the league, not just top 100 for the Niners.
Okay, you make a good point on that. I can agree with that. But Vernon Davis made some big-time catches. Maybe they don't look at that. Maybe they don't look how good of a player he is and how committed he is. But this guy has really came up as a Niner. He came up in big situations. A man that you can rely on. Especially, now next year you don't have Michael Crabtree pretty much like 3/4 of the season, and he's not going to be coming back for a while. So Vernon Davis next year I think could become number 1 overall tight end. A man that's going to be relied on throughout the whole entire season. Because of Michael Crabtree's injury. You don't really, Anquan Bolden too. You can agree with that. Mario Manningham, Kyle Williams. Guys that, I don't think Kyle Williams and Mario Manningham are big time guys, but Mario Manningham can make some good plays too. But when you look at it, Vernon Davis is going to be the main guy for the Niners next year, and I think he could be number 1 tight end by next year. But you get Robert Gronkowski, he's had a good year. Yeah, he's a good player, and that guy think, telling me all this, I think I'm going to maybe go with the New England Patriots side and say, hey, Rob Gronkowski, really deserved it for the last season, how he played and how good he worked, and, Patriots, made it to the playoffs, and how good he did with Tom Brady, how good the connection was between those two. I understand how, he played the second half, and switching off QBs for Vernon Davis was interesting. He said, it's hard, and getting used to Alex Smith. And, he had a good connection with Alex Smith, but Colin Kaepernick, he just didn't really feel it until the playoffs and then, going to the Super Bowl. So, I agree with you. I think Rob Gronkowski is number 1. It's just, I think, if they didn't switch QBs with Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick, I think Vernon Davis could have been number 1.
Robert Dieters joining us, the commissioner of National Sports Radio Station. Number 37, Navarro Bowman. We're going down on this list as well. The San Francisco inside linebacker. He's obviously well short of the ranking of Patrick Willis. He was ranked, we're taking a look here, number 10 on the list. But do you believe that Navarro Bowman, the number 2 linebacker, ranked not inside linebacker, I want to correct myself, in the NFL today, do you agree with that list as well?
I agree with it. There's probably about 36 more guys that are better than him, but, especially, I don't think the top 100 players really looks at defense that much, in my opinion. Defense is a big key in the NFL. I think that they should look at that way more. Patrick Lewis, I think Canton was probably a good pick for him. A man that's really helped the Niners out in many seasons, a very good pickup. Tom Bowman, I think, is around that area. Maybe he could have been a little bit lower, but, I think that's a good ranking for him in that top 100 countdown at about the, 37. Bowman had a really good strong season. I think next year he's going to come out and prove himself even stronger. This defense is just getting better and better.
Robert Dieter is obviously joining us live, and take a look at his Deet Sports Talk, and along with other shows, he'll be live all week long on Spreaker.com's National Sports. Obviously glad for him to join us on this edition of NFL Gold Line Live. We're continuing our countdown from numbers 49 to 25. Andrew, stop me whenever you feel the need to do so. Number 36 is Geno Atkins, the defensive tackle for the Bengals, and we already are at a pause.
My favorite players in the National Football League. I actually think that Atkins should probably be maybe 7 or 8 spots higher. I mean, you want to talk about a guy who is just so far above a lot of his peers, it's ridiculous. Look no further than Geno Atkins. I'd maybe even wager to say that you have Adrian Peterson, you have Calvin Johnson, and then if you're looking for a guy at number 3 with the most distance between number 1 and number 2 at his position, you would go with Geno Atkins. He was an absolute monster last year. He was a run stuffer, a pass rusher, which is extraordinarily difficult to do when you're a D lineman and you're double teamed every single play. And he always managed to get to the football, which is something that you just can't teach. He has fantastic ball skills, is able to stay out on the field every single down, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is for a defensive tackle. And you don't find guys like Geno Atkins anymore. He was dominant. There's no other way to describe it. He is the modern day Warren Sapp. And maybe not as good as Sapp was, but he's the closest.
Nah, he's very, very close to that, nonetheless. He's just in his, I think, his 3rd or 4th season for the Bengals. A very young, very high potential and strong player. He shouldn't even be recognized on this countdown. We should be talking about him in the top 15. And we also mentioned Vince Wilfork at number 30 on this list. I think at the very least they should switch spots. Vince Wilfork gets more of the credit being in that New England Patriot defense. It's all revolved around him because he's, frankly, the only real good player, consistent year in, year out, for that Patriot defense. Meanwhile, for the Bengals, a very solid unit on the defensive side, an unheralded unit, and Geno Atkins just doesn't get the same credit because he doesn't really get all that notoriety, picking up only, it's 10 or so sacks a season, but he just makes the plays defensively that Andrew can agree is unparalleled to any defensive tackle. He's ranked number 2 of all D tackles in the league.
He had 12.5 sacks last year, the next most from a defensive tackle, and Ndamukong Suh with 8. And then after that, Dwan Edwards and Henry Melton are tied with 6. That is double-digit sacks is just extraordinarily difficult to do. I mean, for any position, but especially for a defensive tackle. And that's what makes what Geno Atkins did so impressive.
I mean, you have me sold. Top 10 in the league, but we'll take a look for next year. Obviously, he's just an unheralded player. I don't understand why he's so low on the list when this is a player's list, not a fan's list. But we'll keep it going here. Number 35 is Dez Bryant. I think we can agree a little too high. I don't know.
I think he's about properly ranked.
About properly ranked. Obviously an up-and-coming trending player. Number 34, Charles Tillman, a touch too high. But then again, that Bears defense, he did have, in my mind, I think double-digit turnovers.
For most forced fumbles in the season.
Yeah, very outstanding player. Patrick Peterson, maybe a little too high to put him above everybody at 33. 32, Frank Gore. 31, Clay Matthews.
Might be a little high.
A little high?
I'm not really as sold on Frank Gore as everyone else.
That one's up for debate. It can go either way. Then there's Clay Matthews, 31. Vince Wilfork at 30. You got Justin Smith stopping by at 29. 28, there's where Joe Thomas lands. 27, a little too high in my mind for the Bears wideout. That's Brandon Marshall. Andrew, do you agree?
Thomas, I feel, should be a couple spots higher.
I mean, no surprise there.
I mean, love those left tackles, and he's been consistently the best for going 5-6 solid years now. Left tackles, you don't appreciate them until you don't have them anymore, and I feel like Joe Thomas is going to end up in the Hall of Fame someday.
He reminds me of a guy that just went into the Hall of Fame. Jonathan Ogden? Yeah, absolutely. He's a very stout left tackle, guy that's going to be there for his entire career. Just a solid player and obviously unheralded in that Brown organization. I think he should be top 25, but I don't think we regard him as the top 5 or top 10, especially because he's not really a skill position. That drops him a few notches, but he still is very deserving of being a little bit higher than 28 on this list. 27, Brandon Marshall. 26, Julio Jones, and then Rob Gronkowski at 25. But if this list was done a couple months later, I think we can agree that just with his injury concerns, that should be a knock for having him so high on this list. Don't you agree?
Well, I agree with you, but I also feel like this is a list done by players, which means that they are going to rank the highest, not necessarily the best player, but the ones that they're going to remember playing against the most, if that makes any sense. And that tends to favor just physical specimens like Rob Gronkowski, because you look at a guy that might be above Rob Gronkowski, guys like Julio Jones, Brandon Marshall, Joe Thomas, the last 3 players on this list. Yeah, they're all good, and the case could be made for all of them being above Rob Gronkowski, but if you played against all of them, you're going to remember playing against Rob Gronkowski the most, just because he's an original prototype. There hasn't been anybody like him before, and really, I'm not sure if there ever will be again. So, just because of that, regardless of his production, and he certainly has the production to match, but regardless of what he does, I feel like he'll always be slightly overrated on this list, just because players will remember playing against him.
We did see
even if he is overrated because of that reason, that's got to count for something too.
Absolutely. But we did mention Antonio Gates a couple shows ago being so high for the same reason. He's a very solid player for years. He's just the go-to target for Phillip Rivers, but his injury plague, foot and plantar fascia, just to name a few injuries for the tight end who, in my mind, should be in the consideration of Hall of Famer as well. Very solid target for a whole decade in that Chargers locker room. But to make the point here, I think Rob Gronkowski, we may just, in fact, see the best of Gronkowski because physically starting to deteriorate that body of his. And also, we add on the fact that just we are moving on from this tight end. It seems like the Patriots, where they're trying to find new guys out wide for Brady to go to, and Gronkowski missing so much time right off the get-go in his career definitely puts a toll on the tight end later on in the year, even if he does indeed fix that injury problem. I don't see that happening for the tight end. But there was your top 100 player countdown. Any final reactions, Andrew, on the list so far?
I think that even though the list has a lot of flaws and there are a lot of things that we disagree with, ultimately I think that this is a good thing for football. It gives us something very entertaining to talk about, and the players clearly put a lot of thought into this thing. So, I'm glad that the top 100 list exists. We'll be doing 25 through 1 on our next show, and I'm very excited for it. And just a couple of other unrelated things I wanted to say. First of all, when Robert Dieters was on, there was a little bit of audio issues on my computer. I don't know if there will be for the listeners, but if there was, we certainly apologize for that. And secondly, shout out to everybody at Sports Broadcasting Camps LA right now. I just came back from Boston last week, and it was awesome. So enjoy the time you're there, guys, and we'll see you next week. Nick, please take us out.
Well, we definitely thank you guys for joining us. This is also, we want to give our recognition to Pat Donovan. He died at the age of 88. R. Donovan. We definitely want to get that name right. He died at the age of 88, and obviously was a Hall of Famer, a defensive tackle for the Colts, and he certainly changed the game. We mentioned the Hall of Famers earlier, and that is basically our show, the NFL Goal Line Live. Thank you guys for joining us next week. We're going to be right back here on Monday night as well. Make sure to tune in throughout the week on Spreaker.com, on National Sports Radio Station, to catch all of the updated stories around the National Football League. We have football. Coming up Thursday is the first slate of preseason games. Definitely a lot of football to be had, and we'll see some of the top teams in the NFL commence as we get going with some preseason action. Definitely looking forward to that. Andrew, any lasting thoughts as we wrap up here on NFL Goal Line Live? We finally have football, but just one game we have so far. Definitely preseason, not a lot to look forward to, but the regular season in a month. Andrew, any final thoughts as we wrap up here?
Well, I'm excited for football. I'm as excited for football as you are, and I think we're all glad it's back. It's American tradition. But one other maintenance-related thing to take care of or to mention, I am going to be broadcasting live tomorrow at around 1 p.m. with Matt Markow. We're doing our first episode of AM Sports Live with him back after a couple of weeks away and a guest host or two. So you have that to look forward to. We're going to be talking A-Rod, biogenesis, and a bunch of other stuff. And, of course, Nick and I will hopefully be back here next Monday to do another show and get you all caught up on your football for the week.
Absolutely a lot to look forward to. I mean, definitely take a look at Andrew Goldstein's show. And as we wrap up here, one final storyline. Vince Young, a member of the Green Bay Packers, storyline that just leaked earlier on this afternoon. He will be in that crowded quarterback backfield as the backup to Aaron Rodgers, obviously, in that Green Bay attack. Vince Young, finally, after several years off, is back in the National Football League. Thank you guys for joining us on yet another edition of NFL Goal Line Live. The preseason around the National Football League begins on Thursday night. Stay tuned for that. And also by Monday, a week from tonight, at what we believe will be 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, another edition of NFL Goal Line Live. This is Nick Rice and the co-host Andrew Goldstein, along with Robert Dieters, who joined us earlier, and everybody from the National Sports Broadcast crew signing off on Spreaker.com. Thank you guys for joining us. Catch us next week on another edition of NFL Goal Line Live.